It's this moment that is the great, here is the breakout point. Talk about breakout, Pentecost. Some of you know the account of what happened when I was called to go to Cuba on a mountaintop, and a man was waiting for me there. I went up, and I'm not going to go through all the details, but he's waiting for me there. And he said, I've been waiting for you. The Spirit told me you were coming. And he had painted a picture of me on a ceramic plate, blowing the shofar. I had come up there with a shofar. And he had hung it up in a pavilion of idols on the top of the mountain. And that night that he hung it up, the leather strap broke, and the ceramic plate came down and struck the head of the chief idol god of Cuba. And the worshipers found their idol on the floor the next day with her crown removed. And next to it, this ceramic plate of this Jewish guy with a shofar, it struck her head right where the shofar came out, right where the sound comes out of the shofar. But that wasn't the end of that story. I'm not going through the detail of that, but that wasn't the end of that story. Soon after that, I was called to minister in Brazil. And we're looking at a lake, and on the lake are giant idols, like maybe 10, 15 feet high, floating on these stands on the lake. And one of them is the god Ochun, which is the same god that was on the mountain that had the crown removed, struck on the head. That's strange, because I'm not into all these things here. And I go to the other place, and again, there's that God. And during that mission trip, a man from Brazil prophesies over me and says, you're going to be ministering in Africa. And he goes, so he had no idea. I believe it was about a month away I was going to Africa. I've been invited by a minister there. And I got to the place in Africa. I ministered at night. And Africa is a land of idols and gods, of course. And I was led to tell them the story of what happened on the mountain to show them the power of God over idols. And I share it. And the moment I say the name of that God, Ochun, there's this reaction throughout the whole place. Never happened. After I said, what was that? And they said to me, do you know where that God comes from that was in your travels? I said, no. He said, Nigeria. I said, well, that's where God brought me. He said, do you know the name of the state you're ministering in? I said, no. He said, the state is called Ochun. God had brought me not only to the place where that all began, but he brought me to the land named after that God. The idol whose crown had been removed by the ceramic plate on the mountain of Cuba. Now there's a man in Nigeria who is known as the Pope of that religion, Santeria. He's called the Oni of Ife. The keeper of Ochun, the god, he's the custodian of that god and others. He's considered to be a god himself. Other chiefs bow down to this man. Even senators in Nigeria bow down to him. While we're ministering in that place, the Oni of Ife decides to join the service. He comes with an entourage of people. There's a senator there, and he bows down to him. He gets up on the stage, and in the back of the stage, they had painted a gigantic picture of me sounding the shofar, the same picture on the ceramic plate that struck the head of Ochun and removed the crown. Now the keeper of Ochun gets up under the picture, and in some of the pictures, he's standing right under the shofar where it struck the head of Ochun. And he says, I am not a god. There's only one God, the God who created the world, and he is Jesus. From what I remember. And he removes his title. He says, he renounces his title as God. He's removing his crown. I call him up at the end. I said, let me take a risk. I call him up at the end. I said, I'm doing the Aaronic blessing. I said, come, why don't you just lift your hand with me? And he does it. The press captures it, puts it on the front page. It has, Oni of Ife declares there is only one God, and it has me and him giving the Aaronic blessing. But that wasn't the end of it. They tell me that in the state of Ochun is the shrine of Ochun. People come from all over. I asked them, okay, I guess it's a setup from God, but we're going. So we go to find the shrine of Ochun. It's a pagan forest. Pagan things. And we're praying and praying over. And in the distance is a robed woman watching us, following us. Turns out she's the high priestess of Ochun. Someone in the group, before we leave, approaches her and offers her a Bible. She refuses. But then they offer her again, and she accepts. Now, she couldn't read it. It was in English, but she accepts. So they tell me that as we're going and leaving. I said, okay, wait a minute. We got to go back. I go back. And I tell somebody, I say, go to the bus, get that newspaper, which has on the cover the picture of her Pope and me giving the blessing of God. We go back to her. We show her the newspaper. And with a translator, I begin sharing the gospel with her. Her attendants are on both sides. They're guarding her, watching. Finally, I say, well, let me go for it. I said, do you want to accept Jesus and follow him? She shakes her head, yes. So I pray the prayer, but it's the longest prayer of salvation I've ever prayed because she's been dedicated to this God since infancy. So I'm praying, I renounce this, I turn away from the darkness, I turn to the Lord. Everything, it's long. At the end, I finish, she looks up and her face is literally glowing with we have a picture of it. Her attendants look up, they prayed with her. I tell her, now you don't have to go to the gods anymore. I hold up a Bible and I said, you have the oracle of the living God here. He'll speak to you. I just open it up, not thinking, I want to give her an example. I just open it up, it opens up, I read to what's on the page, and then when I read, what the page says is, the people who walk in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwell in a land of deep darkness, the light has shone on them. From the mountain of Cuba to the lake in Brazil, to being brought to the land of Ochun, having no idea, to the Oni of Ife removing his crown under the picture, to the high priestess of Ochun praying the prayer of salvation. Who could have put that together? Only the hand of God, the mind of the Spirit. Every decision, every plane ticket, everything had to happen exactly. Did I know what I was doing? No, I didn't know what I was doing, not at all. But God did. But I just stepped out to say yes to God at every point. Lord, I want to step out. I want your will. And God put his anointing on him. Good news, people. You don't have to know what you're doing. We don't. We just have to know him who does know what he's doing and know that he does know what he's doing when we don't know what he's doing. God will anoint that which is of his purpose.